What's good, YouTube? So welcome back to Strength Training for Hema, part 0. So this is the video I really should have started the whole series with. I'm going to go over some basic safety information and also going to go over what equipment you should be looking for at a gym and how to choose the right one, and I guess how to recognise that if the gym you're currently at absolutely sucks and you need to go find a new one. But yeah, I'm aware this series is going to end up being a few hours long, but I promise if you're a beginner, this is going to be worth your time. This is information I've condensed down from years of training and experimentation, reading books, reading studies, and speaking to experts in the field. It's very, very difficult for beginners, unfortunately. There is a lot of misinformation, especially online, especially speaking to bros in your gym. There's lots of outright scams out there, and there's also a lot of information which just isn't particularly relevant to beginners or people with more athletic goals. And yeah, it's very, very difficult to separate out what's important and what's credible. So that's what I'm hoping to be able to achieve with this video. So hopefully it will save you an awful lot of time, an awful lot of money, and an awful lot of pain in the long run. So what is a beginner? How do you know if this program and this information is going to be relevant to you? Well, if you have to ask that question, chances are you're probably a beginner. There are different definitions people use. There's different strength standards which people use. Personally, I'd say that if you can't do a pause bench with 90 kilos, you can't squat 120 kilos, and you can't deadlift 160 kilos. If you're male, even if you're not particularly genetically gifted, then this video and this series is going to apply to you. So let's get on with it. So the first piece of equipment you're going to need is going to be either a squat rack or a power rack. So I'm using a squat rack in this video because that's all the gym I'm at had. A power rack is preferable. It basically combines the squat rack and the flat bench into one, but when it comes to benching, you just slide a portable bench underneath there and you've got additional safeties in place, which is always a good thing. And you can do a whole bunch of other exercises there as well. So a proper power rack is preferable. But if you only have a squat rack like this, that's absolutely fine too. And I'm going to show you how to bench safely without the safeties later on in this video. And of course, you could slide a portable bench under this squat rack and bench from it as well. It is an option, but this rack's clearly designed for squatting, and I'd feel like a bit of a dick if I did that, especially if other people were waiting to squat themselves. So I am using two different pieces of equipment in this video. Yeah, it's up to you. As long as you've got somewhere to squat safely and somewhere to bench safely, that's all you really need for most of these exercises. So when it comes to safety and squatting, always have the safety bars in place. If your gym doesn't have safety bars there, especially if you're a beginner, don't squat there. Or if you really must, do front squats instead. And that's basically with the bar in front of your chest rather than behind your back. You're not going to be able to do anywhere near the same amount of weight, but it is a brilliant exercise for the quads. So it is still worth doing, definitely, without a doubt, especially if you can't do back squats. But yeah, well, please don't squat without the safety bars if you're a beginner. It's a bad idea. That is how I've seen every major squatting accident happen. As for more minor squatting injuries, usually they're the result of not warming up effectively, people just rushing them. I've done it a few times where I've got to the gym a bit late and I've just needed to sort of just rush through it, and that's when you end up tweaking something. So please take the time to warm up effectively. It's going to be worth it in the long run. If you injure yourself and you put your progress back a couple of months, yeah, that is why you need to be warming up effectively. So it is quite easy to go too far the other way. A lot of people take their warm-ups way too far, in my opinion. You don't want your warm-ups to be detracting from your work sets. If they're reducing your performance on your work sets, then you're either really, really unfit or you're spending too much time warming up. So yeah, you don't need to go overboard, but you do need to take the time to warm up effectively, and you don't want to be rushing them either. Now, how much time you need to warm up will really depend on you as an individual, how old you are, how fit you are, what your level of flexibility is, what you've been doing that day, and a whole bunch of other things. So some coaches are really strict with exactly how much weight you're using to warm up and how many reps and how many sets and all of that kind of thing. Personally, I'm not. I just want you to be warming up enough that you're feeling nice and mobile and flexible, and the weight's not feeling too heavy, and you've got your technique down and that kind of thing. As long as you've done that, then you should be ready. Provided you have at least a basic level of mobility, you don't need to be doing stretches and stuff for a warm-up. I think stretches are a good idea to do after your workout. I probably don't spend enough time doing them. But yeah, it's a good idea to do them after your workout. You don't need to do them before. You just want to gradually increase the weight and you'll warm up naturally that way. So, personally, I would be starting with some body weight squats, maybe 10, maybe only 5, depending on how I'm feeling. Then I'm going to warm up with the bar. Then I'm going to put on maybe 40, then 60, and then maybe up to 80. I'm only going up to 80 for this anyway. And like I said, you don't want to be wearing yourself out. You don't want to be going anywhere near failure with your warm-ups. You just want to do enough to be loosening yourself up nicely. And as for rest in between sets, when it comes to your warm-up, you want to be pretty much fully recovering. You want to be recovered enough so that it's not detracting from your next set, but you don't want to be resting so long that your body ends up cooling down between the sets. So yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to warming up. So in summary, you don't want to be rushing it. You want to take enough time to get yourself nice and loose and get your technique down and all of that stuff, but you don't want to be doing so much that it ends up detracting from your work set. And finally, I forgot to mention about setting up the safeties. What I like to do is I squat down with just my body weight to see roughly where the safeties should be, and then I'll squat down with the bar to make sure they are actually in the right place, and that's how I get them set up. An important thing to note is please don't confuse a power rack with a machine like this. Power racks let you move the bar any way you want, whereas a machine like this forces the bar to move in either a 1 or 2 dimensional path, and your body doesn't want to move like that quite often, and as a result you can end up injuring yourself quite badly as a result. Now, this isn't to say that machines like this are completely useless. I do like to use them for calf raises every once in a while if there isn't anything else available, but please don't confuse a machine like this with a power rack. So next up, you want somewhere to do pull-ups. Now, every single gym I have ever been to has had places to do pull-ups. Most gyms will have lots of places to do them, but it is such an important exercise that I think it really is worth mentioning here. Now, if you're currently too weak to do them, then you want a lat pull-down machine or possibly even a cable station to build the strength that way. I'll talk a bit about that later in the video. Next up, we have the flat bench press. Ideally, you want it to have a little bit of grip, and you don't want it to be too spongy. Yeah, you don't want to be horribly uncomfortable on there, but at the same time, you don't want it too spongy because that will take away from your stability. If your bench isn't particularly great, like this one, you can still make do, you can still make tremendous strength gains. I'm just talking about, the ideal situation there. As for safety measures, I would never put clips on the end of the barbell, and the reason for this is if you get pinned by it, you're not going to be able to get out. If you don't have pins on, then you can just tip the weights off the end. Yeah, it's a bit embarrassing, but it's better than being stuck there better than dying. So yeah, don't put the clips on. Ideally though, I'd also have a spotter in place as well to grab the bar if it gets too much. But if you're sensible about it, hopefully it should never come to that. It's also quite nice to have an incline bench, although a lot of portable benches you can adjust to fit an incline instead. Decline bench is also quite beneficial at times, but I would never decline bench without somebody spotting you. I think the risks just don't make up for the reward you get from it. So next up we have dumbbells. I'd highly recommend you find dumbbells going up to at least 30 kilos and preferably much higher than that. My first gym only went up to 20 kilos and that did seem like a colossal amount of weight at first, but for long-term progress, unless you're just doing ridiculously high reps or you only ever use them for movements you can't use huge amounts of weight in, such as side and front raises, yeah, that's just not going to be anywhere near enough long term. My current gym goes up to 50 kilos and for certain lifts even that isn't enough. So really the higher they go the better. Now the program I've written for beginners only has one dumbbell lift and that's the one arm push press, but you're not going to be on this program forever if you decide to do it. And plenty of other programs do make far more extensive use of dumbbells, so it's always good to have them. And even if you have no plans of ever using dumbbells, you're only using barbells at the moment, for example, and you have no plans of changing, yeah, things probably will change in the future. Every lifter I know has changed their training philosophy at least a few times, so it's always good to have them. The only other thing is make sure they're going up in nice small intervals. So the smaller the better. Most gyms go up in 2 kilo intervals, but any bigger gaps than that and you really are going to have quite a hard time jumping up in weight. So yeah, 30 kilo minimum and nice small intervals between the weights. So next up we have the cable station. It's not as important as a decent set of barbells and or dumbbells, but it's still an incredibly versatile piece of equipment. So at a push you can use it for seated row and you can use it for lat pull downs, and for that alone I think a good cable station is worth having access to. So perhaps your gym doesn't have those pieces of equipment, or perhaps those pieces of equipment are busy and you just want to get your workout done. For that alone, I think it's definitely worth having. So it's not just those exercises though. You can do tricep push downs, you can do curls, you can do cable crossovers, cable flies, whole bunch of exercises you can do with them. Make sure that you have one where you can adjust the height of the cable, so you'd want it nice and low for curls and seated row, you'd want it nice and high for lat pull downs and tricep push downs and that kind of thing. You also want to make sure that you have a double cable station. Sometimes you're going to want to use both arms. You want to make sure that you have multiple attachments for it, so it's going to have one arm attachment, it's going to have two arm attachments, and ones which hold your grips in different positions. So you can have a nice narrow grip, you can have a wide grip. So you want different attachments for different, depending on what exercise you're doing and depending on what muscles you want to target. And also you want to make sure that the weight goes nice and high on it again. The one at this gym only goes up to 25 kilos on the single cable station, which quite frankly isn't anywhere near enough. You want to be going up to at least 50 kilos, and if you're doing lat pull downs with them, ideally you want it to go up to 100 kilos or possibly even more. So that's it for the essentials. If your gym has all of this equipment to the specs I've mentioned and nothing else, you have yourself a fantastic gym for long-term full body strength gains. There is other equipment which is a bonus and does have its proper place and can be very beneficial if used correctly, But if your gym has all of the other bonus equipment in the world but lacks the basics, it's probably not going to be a very good gym for strength training unless you're very knowledgeable and very creative in your approach to strength training. So as for some of the other equipment, if you currently lack the strength to do pull-ups or chin-ups, then a lat pull-down machine is absolutely fantastic. There are other approaches as well, but I do think the lat pull-down machine is one of the better ways. Just make sure that the weight goes up to somewhere close to your body weight, and you should be able to gain the strength pretty quickly to do the pull-ups and chin-ups properly. Then you have the seated row. You can do rows with a barbell as well, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it can be very taxing on your lower back, and that's going to limit how much weight you can actually use, and that will obviously take away development from the target muscle groups. So if they are too taxing, then it is better to do seated row or something like that instead. I do really like the seated row for that reason, and there's two main variations. You have the cable version, and the cable version I think is the superior way, provided the weight goes up high enough. So you want it going up to at least 100 kilos. 100 kilos is too light for me now, so what I do, I go lighter and I do it with one hand instead, and unless I jump on the vitamin S, that's never going to reach a point where it's too light for me. So as long as it goes up to 100 kilos, you're going to be able to get long-term progress with the seated row. There's also the version you can load up with weight plates yourself, and this can go up to a much higher weight. So if you're using two hands, then this is a better approach. But if you do go into one-handed, then I do think the cable version's better, because it's a smoother amount of tension along the range of motion, and it doesn't restrict your movement in the same way. So generally I consider the cable variation to be superior. I would also recommend finding a gym which has some way of doing direct weighted ab work. So I quite like to use kettlebells doing ab work. You can put a weight plate behind your head instead. But there's nothing wrong with using a machine for crunches. Machine crunches I think are great as well. I don't really think there's much difference when it comes to isolation work for your abs. Just again, make sure the weight goes up high enough. The temporary gym I'm at only goes up to 60 kilos, which isn't really enough. If you've got 95 kilos or thereabouts, or maybe even a bit higher, then that's probably going to be enough for you long term using a machine. And finally, a commenter in a previous video about this program did mention about doing farmers walks and adding those to the program. I think that's an absolutely fantastic idea with a few caveats. So first off, you need a gym with the facilities to do them. Ideally, you want farmers walk handles and you want a track. You can use dumbbells if you can find dumbbells going up to a high enough weight. And you can use barbells, but it's pretty tricky to balance them correctly. But it can be done, as seen here. So if you really want to do them, by all means, you can use barbells. And also, recovery is going to be a factor as well. Farmers walks are going to be quite taxing on the system, but if you do have the recovery capability and it's not detracting from other aspects of your training, then I really would recommend you do the farmers walks. And I would be doing them instead of the calf raises, and the reason for that is farmers walks are fantastic for the calves as well, and they also work the traps. They work the forearms, and my program could do with a bit more work for those muscles, and just overall fantastic full body exercise and brilliant conditioning. So yeah, I would put them instead of the calf raises. I would do 2 sets of 2 laps up and down the hall and add 2.5 kilos per workout to the farmer's walk. So that's 2.5 kilos in total, not 2.5 kilos per side. So that's how I do it. Alternatively, you could have an extra day in the gym. You could add a 4th day. Ramp up the weight slowly, because otherwise you'll find yourself burning yourself out pretty quickly. So yeah, you could do farmers walks on a separate day and perhaps add a few other conditioning exercises instead. So that's it for part 4. I'll see you again soon with part 5.